Okay, we are live.
All right, thank you. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in to tonight's Planning Commission meeting. I'm Marty Dahl, Community and Economic Development Director for the City of Victoria. Even though the doors to City Hall are temporarily closed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, we want to make sure that our public meetings continue in an open and transparent manner. State statute allows the city to conduct meetings by telephone, and the Victoria City Council has taken action to allow our council and commission meetings to temporarily take place remotely during this pandemic emergency. If you are watching us live online or on Mediacom Channel 8 and you would like to provide input during tonight's meeting, please call 1-408-418-9388 now and enter meeting ID 624-679-687. Again, that number is 1-408-418-9388 and meeting ID is 624-679-687. For anyone joining us by phone, please be aware of these important notes and instructions. All callers will be muted until the public hearing begins. You will be prompted by the Planning Commission Chair to speak at the appropriate time. Lines will be temporarily unmuted one at a time during the public hearing. In the future, advance registration to speak during public hearings is strongly encouraged. Those who have registered in advance will be called upon first, followed by anyone else who is dialed in during the meeting. We ask that anyone wishing to address the commission follow the chair's prompts, be respectful, wait for your turn to speak, and try not to speak over one another. Callers wishing to be recognized must speak up to get into the queue when prompted by the chair. Callers will still need to provide their names and addresses for the record. It's important that everyone be able to hear each other and the discussion, so please speak loudly, speak clearly, and speak directly into your phone or microphone. We are broadcasting this meeting live and are recording it so it can be viewed later on demand. If you'd like to see any of the visual presentations during tonight's meeting, you can watch the live stream at victoria.civicweb.net/portal and click on the live stream button or turn to Mediacom Channel 8. We do have a quorum of Planning Commission members present, as well as our presenters and staff who are participating in this meeting remotely. And finally, different from our usual process, all actions of the Planning Commission will be taken by a roll call vote. This is a new process for us all, so we thank you for your patience and constructive feedback as we work through this unprecedented situation. And please know that we're working hard to ensure that your voice can still be heard while maintaining everyone's health and safety. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I will now call this meeting 4/21/2020 Victoria Planning Commission to order. The first order of business tonight is to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. Members of the Planning Commission, before I ask a motion, just a couple quick notes. Just like the previous meeting, please state your name when moving and seconding. Please remember to mute your microphones when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise. Commissioners, is there a motion to adopt the final agenda?
Laura Moore nominates motion.
Is there a second?
Mary Jo Garst.
I have a motion made by Commissioner Moore, seconded by Commissioner Gar. I'm now going to take roll call on the vote. Commissioner Brownlee?
Aye.
Commissioner Kuhn?
Aye.
Commissioner Gar?
Aye.
Commissioner Blazer?
Aye.
Commissioner Schwarning?
Aye.
Chair Stensland? Aye. Thank you. The motion carries. Next order of business is to adopt the the minutes from our meeting dated April 7th, 2020, Planning Commission workshop and regular meeting. Again, members of the Planning Commission, When I ask for a motion, please state your name when moving and seconding. Commissioners, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Mary Jo Gar, so moved.
Is there a second?
Laura Moore, motions a second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Gar and it's seconded by Commissioner Moore. I'm now going to take a roll call vote. Commissioner Brownlee,
Aye.
Commissioner Kuhn,
Aye.
Commissioner Gar,
Aye.
Commissioner Blazer,
Aye.
Commissioner Schwarting,
Aye.
Chair Stensland, aye. Thank you. The motion carries. We're now going to move on to our discussion items. Commissioners, just another reminder, please mute your microphones when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise. Thank you. We have one item on our agenda tonight, and it includes a public hearing. For those of you watching at home or are listening on a conference call to speak, I'd like to provide a few instructions on how we will take the public comment. Anyone wishing to provide comment during the public hearing should call 1-408-418-9388 now and enter meeting ID 624-679-687. Once again, that telephone number is 1-408-418-9388 and enter ID 624-679-687. Callers, please note, when you call in, you'll be put on mute. You will be unmuted when it is your turn to speak, so please stay on the line. Before we get to the callers, we will first hear any presentations by staff and the applicant. After the presentations, we will open the public hearing and we will unmute the callers one at a time. Callers, when your line is unmuted, you will hear 2 beeps. That is your cue that you are unmuted. Listen for those 2 beeps as an indication that it is your turn to speak. I will then give you the prompt. Caller, please state your name and address. If you are on the line, please say your first and last name at that time. I will then repeat your name so that you know that you are unmuted and have the floor. You may then provide your comments. After you have given your comments, you will be placed back on mute and we will move on to the next caller and so on. After all public comment has been heard, the Planning Commission will start its discussion and take any required action. All right, here we go. This is new. We're going to have our first public hearing on teleconference. Thanks, everyone. So the first item tonight for discussion is item 3.1, Laketown 16 Edition Preliminary Plat. For those of you listening or watching from home, please note that we have Paul Turbone from Lennar on the call representing the developer. Before I open the public hearing, I'm going to turn this over to Senior Planner Paul Moretto for the staff presentation. Paul?
Thank you, Chair, Commission members. Again, tonight we have a request for a public hearing for the Laketown 16 Edition Preliminary Plat. We currently have an applicant, the Lennar Corporation. Tonight we're requesting that the Planning Commission conduct a hearing to provide a recommendation to the City Council regarding the application. Planning Commissioners are requested to wait until after the hearing to take a position on the application. And I'm just going to take a few moments to read from our staff report here. A little bit of background. In 2004, the City Council approved Laketown Site Plan, represented by Lennar Corporation, the applicant. The site plan depicts single-family homes in the area currently referred to as Laketown 16, the subject site. On August 26th of 2019, the City Council approved a final plat for Laketown 13th Edition, which platted the subject site as Outlot B for future development. This included an R2 zoning. And the current proposal, the current site is currently undeveloped, The preliminary plat includes 25 lots for single-family homes on approximately 16 acres, of which 5.4 are wetland and 11.22 acres are buildable, which is also located south of the existing Laketown neighborhood, west of Timber Terrace. The applicant is seeking a rezoning from the property from R2 to planned unit development R1, as single-family homes are no longer allowed in the city's R2 district as of June 10th, 2019. The adjacent properties include a site bounded to the north by wetland and single-family homes, to the west by land zoned for future single-family residential, to the east by residential properties owned by the Simon family zoned as future single-family residential, and to the south by Marsh Lake Road and farmland owned by the Schmeek family. Existing conditions include a site comprised of wetlands, open areas, and a woodland stand. There are large wetlands located to the northwest portion of the property and a smaller wetland located to the northeast of the site. Very little cultivated vegetation exists currently. Utilities are available to serve the development. The applicant is proposing 25 attached single-family home lots that are generally 70 feet wide and 130 feet deep. The result is a density of 2.23 units per buildable acre. The current guiding for the comprehensive plan is that this is to be low-density residential, as described in the 2040 plan. The lot configuration for the PUD, which is proposed, are setbacks similar to those from the removed R2 single-family zoning, which allowed for 8-foot side yard setbacks, 25-foot front yard setbacks, total lot size minimum of 7,500 square feet, and a buildable height of 35 feet. The City Council amended the zoning code in 2019 to remove this standard and replace it with an R2 duplex zoning. The applicant is proposing 8-foot side yard setbacks, 25-foot front yard setbacks on Bridle and on the north side of Catkin, 20-foot front yard setbacks on the south side of Catlin, 30-foot rear yard setbacks, and a lot size ranging from anywhere between 8,500 to 14,000 square feet. The subject site was originally platted as an outlot in the Laketown 11th edition and was then replatted as an outlot B in Laketown 13th in August of 2019. The outlot is zoned R2. The R2 zone change allowed for grandfathering of any platted lot as of June 2019. Those included those with applications pending. Because there are no buildable lots platted on the subject site at that time of the zoning change, this site is not to be grandfathered into the old R2 zoning. The applicant is requesting a PUD in lieu of the former R2 zoning standards. The PUD is a tool that would allow the city to consider changes to the zoning standards in exchange for greater achievement in stated Victoria development goals. Generally, the city has noted its desire to preserve and protect natural resources, establish park and trail networks or greenways, and establish significant berms and screening of new developments from county and state road systems. The building type and lot standards that are proposed by the applicant are not unique to the surrounding neighborhoods, as they match the existing character to the other Laketown developments and those further west on Marsh Lake Road in design, zoning standards, and layout. They are, however, some qualities of the development that should be considered by the Planning Commission, which are outlined below, when making its determination on the preliminary plat. Access to the development will be a road extension on Bridle Way. Homes will be accessed off the Bridle Way extension and the new public street currently referred to as Catkin. The new public streets that are proposed are at a standard right-of-way of 60 feet and the roadway width of 28 feet. An original concept plan of the subject site included a connection to Marsh Lake Road. However, this connection created site development constraints and issues, and staff was supportive of its removal as the access would likely provide only a short-term benefit. Catkin Court is envisioned to extend into the Simon property to the east and to the Kelzer property to the west to serve possible development in the future. Utilities, sewer, water utilities are available with the construction of Laketown 13. A minor extension will be provided to services to proposed neighborhood. Stormwater ponding is proposed to the northeast side of the development. The stormwater ponding will be required to meet Minnehaha Creek Watershed District standards. Grading on the development of the proposed site, grading will be in a way that accommodates runoff and also avoids installation of private or public retaining walls as part of the development. However, there are some lots, including lots 1 through 3 and 6 and 7 on Block 2 and lot 11 on Block 3, that have significant slopes of 16 to 25% rear yard slopes. That may require homeowners to install a retaining wall to attain more usable yard space in the future. Trails and sidewalks. There is an existing sidewalk in the Laketown neighborhood north of the site along Timber Terrace. The proposed development includes a sidewalk that connects the existing network to the north. The preliminary plat includes sidewalk on north side of Bridle Way and Ketkin. Regarding screening and landscaping, the applicant is asking for an exception to the city's berm requirement, which requires a 40-foot wide buffer in combination with an 8-foot earthen berm along Marsh Lake Road. Due to the desire of the developer to achieve the proposed lot density, a berm meeting the prerequisite standards cannot be realized. In lieu of a full berm, the developer has proposed a half berm or partial berm in the planting and efforts to meet the screening intent of the berm requirement. The Commission and Council should determine if this proposed berm and planting meets the intent of the city's requirements. The proposed berm planting plan currently does not meet the requirement of Section 33-6 of the city zoning ordinance, which requires 3 overstory trees, 5 evergreens, and 3 ornamental trees for each 50 lineal feet of required berm. The required berm length in the development is 760 lineal feet. The required and proposed numbers of the plans are as follows. The required are 45 overstory trees, 75 evergreen, and 45 ornamental. The proposed is 0 overstory, 99 evergreens, and 18 ornamentals. It appears that the submitted berm plan proposed that the city consider an alternative method for computing the required landscaping using caliper inches and plant height rather than actual quantity. Staff are open to this methodology. However, based on brief review of the proposed plantings, the calculations provided do not appear to meet what staff would consider to be the requirements based on an alternative method. The final landscaping plans must meet required berm plantings. Tree preservation. The tree preservation plan submitted with the preliminary plat application was approved as part of the Laketown 13th edition development plans. As staff has noted, in those plans indicated a significant clearing of the existing stand of trees. While many of these trees within the woodland area are classified as insignificant in accordance with the current tree preservation ordinance, staff is asking the Planning Commission and Council to consider whether the removal of the entire tree stand would be detrimental to the natural resources and characteristics of the development area. In an effort to perhaps offset this increased density and reduced lot size being requested as part of the PUD, the Planning Commission and City Council could direct the developer and staff to plan to replant or reforest strategic areas within the 2 city-dedicated outlets. Details of this type of planting would need to be further discussed and reviewed as the project progresses. Staff is seeking direction from the Planning Commission and the Council related to this issue. And here's a slide here that goes with that. Just one moment. In addition to that, for engineering typical of most preliminary plat approvals, the developer has been provided a letter from staff, which is attached, outlining several engineering-related items that should be addressed as any future final plat application. If the preliminary plat is approved, these items should be conditioned to that approval. For rezoning, the property is currently zoned R2, which an action that occurred during the replat of Laketown 11th and Laketown 13th in August of 2019. The property is guided in the comprehensive plan as low-density residential. The property would need to be rezoned to planned unit development with an underlying zoning of R1 low-density residential. And that's for the reason we only allow single-family residential in the R1 zone. If the preliminary plat is approved, approval of final rezoning to PUD should be conditioned into that approval. Just as a side note, the PUD is described in the city zoning ordinance as follows. The purpose of the PUD ordinance is to allow innovative, creative, and flexible development that is sensitive to the environmental, cultural, and economic considerations in partnership with public values as outlined in the comprehensive plan. A PUD is subject to additional requirements and standards when, in the opinion of the City Council, will protect the general welfare, public safety, and neighborhood character. A PUD shall not be approved simply to circumvent zoning ordinance regulation that prohibits the development underlying typical zoning regulations. And that is a part of our code here. We have requested action. The Planning Commission is requested to conduct a public hearing and to make a motion of recommendation to City Council. There are a number of options available to the Planning Commission. They can make any one of these motions to recommend. They can recommend approval as submitted, approval with conditions, which must have a clear connection to the project, or they can recommend denial with findings of fact. With that, that ends my review. There's a number of attachments as well that are available for review, both online that we can look, or they could be viewed online. And with that, I can turn it over to the chair.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks for that great presentation. Next, Mr. Pavone, does Lennar have a presentation or any information they would like to provide before we open the public hearing?
No formal presentation, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, but I just wanted to quickly, I guess, kind of summarize where we're at. As you all know, I'm sure there's a lot of history associated with this project. So I want to thank city staff and city officials and the commission for working with us and getting to this point. We have gone through a few different rounds of revisions with this plan. As you recall, I believe in 2018, we tried to do a preliminary plat for the entirety of the remainder of the community down to Marsh Lake Road, but due to the fact that Marsh Lake Road was a pretty large unknown at the time, we opted to take off what you're seeing before you this evening. I'm happy to speak to the other kind of PUD things that have gotten us to this point if you wish, but I'm also happy to answer any questions. So in short, trying to keep it to what was the intent of the neighborhood from the beginning, which was single family detached residential homes in this area. And we are engineering it so that it is in accordance with the types of homes, the type of development regulations, and the overall theme of what was approved and is being constructed in Laketown 9th, 10th, 11th, and 14th editions. So I'm happy to stand for any questions and provide any other insight as we go through the process.
Great, thank you. I think what we'll do then is, yes, sir. Yeah.
This is Paul.
Yes.
We also have 2 letters that were submitted, and I think we have a summary from our director, Marty Dahl.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Actually, I think, Chair, I'll let you open the public hearing first so that those can be included as part of the public hearing before we move on to the callers.
Perfect. Just kind of run through then what I'll do now. So I'm not, for folks on the line, I'm going to open up the public hearing. We have had 2 letters sent to the city. So Marty's going to summarize those for us. After that, we'll queue up and we'll go through the callers online. We're going to start with Mr. Carlson. So I will open the public portion of this meeting. And Marty, can you summarize the letters that we received, please?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we did receive 2 letters. Actually, one of the letters was from Jennifer and Josh Mulvihill, who I understand are on the line tonight. So rather than summarizing their letter, which is included as part of the background packet for anyone who would like to see it, I will defer to their time to speak to the commission to talk about their questions with the Laketown 16th. The second letter was from the Schmieg Hilltop Farms on 5475 Marsh Lake Road. And just in summary, their letter included that their family has been farming the area for the past 167 years and plan to continue to do so into the future. They have a desire to continue honoring agriculture as Victoria grows residentially, and a blending of the 2 different land uses, agriculture and new development, as will speak to Victoria's farming heritage. They believe that the city has done valuable work creating quality corridors through the use of berms in its development, which offers a rural appeal in the midst of new neighborhoods. They do have a question about, in the proposal, the half berm, which I understand the applicant will be able to speak to, and whether the proposed changes in the berm planting mix are aimed at compensating for a diminished berm as per the standards. They did in their letter request the city to honor its existing ordinance of the 40-foot wide buffer with an 8-foot berm. They also noted that the intent of those berms is to reduce possible detrimental influence when transitioning from residential to agriculture, and that a buffer of substance allows residential and rural to coexist. They did point to Teller's Road and the Hess Dairy Farm across from the Rhapsody development as an effective example. And they did indicate that the new developments on the west end of Marsh Lake Road have requisite continuous landscaping berms that have helped with that transition. They, in closing, they stated that the aesthetics of Victoria's many corridors are enhanced by these berms, which create a sense of countryside, interspersed with farms, fields, idyllic woods, lakes, and emerging neighborhoods along these unique corridors. The existing berm ordinance ensures this quality and continuity of character for Victoria as it continues to grow. So that again is a summary from the Schmeek Family Farms, and the full letter is part of the background packet that's available to the public.
Great. Thanks, Marty. I think you summarized that really well. Okay, so now we're going to go to our callers. And I know we have some, so we're going to start with John Carlson. John, when it's unmuted, would you please state your first and last name and your address, please?
John Carlson, 752 Tilia Lane, Victoria.
Great. Okay, we have John Carlson on the line. Mr. Carlson, what are your comments, please?
Well, first of all, thank you for an opportunity to provide some input on this project. I would indicate I'm an 18-year resident of Victoria, and I'm a member of the Victoria Park and Recreation Committee. I served on the 2040 Strategic Planning Steering Committee and also served on our Finance Committee. And I understand that there's complexity with this project. There always is. Everything from topic of trees to berms to buffers and a lot more. And those are things that obviously you're going to need to talk through. My focus in terms of calling in this evening relates to the specific area of sidewalks and trails. And in that section, there was really no reference to trails. As you know, trails are a key component in our comprehensive plan and also in the City Council strategic plan. Also, you are aware that the City Council has approved moving forward with the Marsh Lake Road project. And they also decided at that time to not go forward with a trail for the complete Marsh Lake Road at this time. However, they did express a desire for an eventual placement of a trail on the north side of Marsh Lake Road. And they also discussed the possibility of trail sections being built on the north side of the road as the remaining undeveloped parcels were developed. There are significant benefits of doing just that. It means, for example, when a full complete trail is put in, a significant percentage will have already been completed, reducing the cost to future taxpayers. Right now, as a city, our number one trail disconnect is Bavaria Road. Unfortunately, years ago, as the development happened along that road, long-term planning was lacking in terms of berms, easements, and trail. So as a part of this project, the city is currently dealing with obtaining easements and having to pay property owners for land so we can put in a complete and full trail. Bavaria is an important trail corridor. Big picture and long term tells us that Marsh Lake Road Trail will be a key connector of Highway 43 and 11 and regionally as well.
Thanks, John. You have anything else?
Yeah, I would like to urge you to give every consideration, at least minimum, to have a trail easement built into this project. Better yet, to have the developer pave that trail. Now, some people will say it's a trail to nowhere, but that's only if you're looking at it with your looking down at your feet. If you look at this from the longer term perspective and with the entire city in mind, it's a smart thing to do. I recognize there is complexity and there are trade-offs, but keep in mind the big picture, the long term, and also the precedent you are setting as future undeveloped properties are considered for development along Marsh Lake Road. With that, I'm going to wrap up my comments. Scott, I appreciate the opportunity to give feedback. As a fellow volunteer, I appreciate the great work all of you do as volunteers on the Planning Commission, and also the great work that our staff does. Thank you, Scott. I'll sign off.
Thank you, John. Okay, I know we have another caller, a pair of callers, the Mulvivilles, Josh and Jen. So Jen or Josh or both, when you hear the beeps and you're unmuted, would you please state your name and address, please?
Hey, Planning Commission, we are here. We are Jen and Josh Mulvihill.
Hello.
And we live at 5720 Marsh Lake Road in Victoria.
Okay,
So
thank you. So we go ahead. I just want to just announce that we do have both Josh and Jen Mulvihill on the line. What are your comments, please?
All righty. Well, we did submit a letter to the commission about this, but we won't reread our whole letter, but we just wanted to make a couple of points with regard to this Laketown 16th plat. So we strongly feel that the preliminary plat submitted by Lennar needs revision prior to moving forward on a couple of items. We wanted to point out that on March 16th of 2018, Lennar brought forth a similar plan to the Planning Commission, and it was denied. There was a number of reasons involved, but one of the reasons was Lennar's lack of screening, which was a berm along Marsh Lake Road, and the issues related to the land's grade and some storm sewer things. But I just wanted to read you guys a quote. It was an observation that was made to the Planning Commission by city staff at that time. It said, the city requires a buffer along Marsh Lake Road to screen the proposed homes from the county road because the county road was planned at that time. The buffer is required to be a minimum of 40 feet, including an earthen berm with a minimum height of 8 feet, and include the prescribed minimum landscaping. The applicant has provided some landscaping in this area with the intent of providing screening between the proposed lots in Marsh Lake Road, but the proposed plans do not include an earthen berm or the requisite 40 feet of width buffer for the majority of lots located along Marsh Lake Road, end quote. So with regards to the berm, the city of Victoria currently has berming ordinances in place, and we as neighbors would request that those ordinances be followed. In the staff report, there was a photo of homes that have been built on the east end of Marsh Lake Road, and it's very important to recognize that those homes did not follow city ordinances, and that was done solely for the reason that Carver County was planning on moving Marsh Lake Road. And it's a perfect example of the city not implementing ordinances with the developer, and it has led to numerous issues, even as John just spoke to, with the trail and the alignment and the screening, and they have a pool there and it's way too close to the road. So ordinances by the city need to be followed. Secondly, we, in October of last year, we contacted the city of Victoria. We spoke with Paul Moretto with concerns after seeing Lennar clear cut part of this land and bring in hundreds of truckloads of dirt. We have video footage of Lennar hauling dirt around the clock for days on end. And there currently is a stockpile that is twice the height of the current landscape. And we have suspicions about why Lennar was doing that, but we would like that current stockpile of dirt addressed, and we would like to know what Lennar's plans are to remove it, because we do not want to see the grade of the land completely change from what it currently is. I have a photo of what it looked like before. I have a photo of what it looks like right now if anybody would like to see it. We have concerns. We have ongoing questions regarding for the widespread clear cut of mature trees. We can see a lot of mature trees. And then finally, the city of Victoria, the city council indicated that At the time of development, right-of-way was to be dedicated back to the city for a future wider Marsh Lake roadway, and that would include that trail space, but it's bigger than that for the future Marsh Lake Road. So we would like to know if this plan includes that added right-of-way requirement, and we would just recommend that if the plat moves forward, that Lennar would be held to the same standards that the prior planning commission held them to and to current city code, and that includes by berming that berm along Marsh Lake Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other callers?
No.
Okay. Hearing no additional public input, commissioners, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
This is John Brownlee. I move to close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
This is Laura Moore. I second the motion.
I have a motion by Commissioner Brownlee, seconded by Commissioner Moore. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll now take a roll call vote. Commissioner Brownlee?
Aye. Sorry, aye. Hey, Scott, we're voting on closing the public comment. Right?
We're closing the public hearing.
I'm sorry. Yes, aye.
Okay. Commissioner Kuhn,
Aye.
Commissioner Gar,
Aye.
Commissioner Blazer,
Aye.
Commissioner Schwarting,
Aye.
Chair Sensland, aye. We'll now close the public hearing. Thank you. Motion carries. I'll now open the floor for the Planning Commission to discuss. To help reduce the chance of talking over one another, I'm sure it's going to happen as we get into this a little bit, but we'll try and do our best. Maybe, when someone sort of ends, we'll give them a kind of a two-step count. We'll kind of wait a little bit before we start. I know that's hard to do sometimes, especially for me. But I'll start. I'm going to go down the list and kind of go through questions. I think our callers brought up some great points. I look forward to discussion with all of you on these, and also a letter from the Schmeek family. So I'm just going to start at the top here. I'm going to throw you under the bus, Commissioner John Lee. Do you have any questions, discussion points you'd like to add?
Did you say John Brownlee?
I did.
I don't. I'm gonna hold off for now.
Okay. Commissioner Kuhn?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to maybe hear from Lennar about kind of some of the concerns on the pathway issues that John Carlson brought up. And, I guess also kind of on what, why the reasoning on the berm of, I still don't understand why we can't have the ordinance berm put in there, and what their reasoning is for trying to make it smaller. I guess there are a couple questions I have, and I don't know if Paul just wants to address these afterwards or how he wants to comment on those.
Well, I definitely want to get to everyone, but I think, going through this, I think there's going to be two that really do stand out. And I think it's going to be the berm. And I agree with John Carlson, it's going to be the pathways. And I'm going to speak for myself for a second with the berms. You know, I've had, I think Commissioner Moore has been with me on this. We had the opportunity to sit and work with the city council at some workshops with consultants that work for the city. And one of the things I've noticed that they pointed out is berms, and what a great job our community has done with berms. You drive down County Road 11, County Road 43, and there's evidence of that. And that happened because of city planners who, like John Carlson mentioned, you know, had the foresight to look ahead. And I do think, you know, Marsh Lake Road in 20 years is likely to be built out on both sides, north and south. And I think that takes some hard decisions to look that far in the future. But I think a standard berm, you know, as required, is really essential to this community. And Paul, I know you're here, and I wonder if you could maybe start by addressing that.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, happy to address that comment as well as the others that were made. If you don't mind, I could just kind of go in order because I was taking some notes.
Sure.
Okay. So to the comment about the trails being paved along the north side of Marsh Lake Road, back in 2015, Lennar did dedicate a 75-foot half-width for Marsh Lake Road for future development of Marsh Lake Road. At the time, the discussion was that the full improvement of Marsh Lake Road is going to be 150 feet wide. I believe since then it's been reduced. I've been talking with Kara Guerin on it. And my understanding is that the council has kind of gone a different direction. That being said, the city still has that 75-foot half width. And actually, when we were looking at the final, not the final design, but trying to really kind of wrap up the design of this last piece of Laketown, we had kind of talked with city staff about how we were going to be able to make this work because the slopes in that area are pretty steep. In fact, I want to say it's roughly a 20-foot fall from the edge of Marsh Lake Road as it is right now to the back of the home sites that we're proposing. So what we had discussed with the city, and this kind of dovetails into my next point, is the berming. The way that the ordinance reads, there's supposed to be a 40-foot separation. We're aware of that, with an 8-foot earthen berm that's landscaped. Because of the grades that fall from the road, you're not able to quite get a large berm there unless you bring up the entire site or you lower Marsh Lake Road. So it's a pretty difficult situation there, and I'm sure the city engineer can speak to some of this. But what we're trying to do, and based on previous experience with previous planners, last year when we worked on Laketown 13th edition along County Road 11, what I kept hearing over and over was that what's really important is the backside of the berm. So you basically have your road, and then the berm would go up roughly about 8 feet, and then it drops the backside down 8 feet. And so that's where we put a lot of our emphasis, was the backside of the berm, not necessarily the street or county road side of the berm, because the backside of the berm is what's screening the residents. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. So what we did here, if you look at the grading plan, and it's a little bit hard to see it, I understand, but what we did here is we basically tied the grades right up to the edge of the road. So in your most westerly portion of the plat, you have Marsh Lake Road that's set at roughly about 1,000. Let me read the contours here.
Excuse me, can we have this on the screen while you're discussing this?
Currently pulling it up as you speak.
I'm not able to share my screen, but the point that I'm trying to make.
Well, I'm concerned for people who don't have the entire packet who may be looking in. Can we just hold for a minute and get this on the screen? There we go. Maybe it was only, maybe it wasn't on mine. I apologize. Go ahead.
Okay, so on the western portion of that site, or of the community, or the proposal as it is, we have roughly 10 to 12 feet from the top, or the edge, I should say, of existing Marsh Lake Road down to the back of the home sites. So in effect, what you have is the road and then a slope down to the home sites. It's about 10 to 12 feet, which would function as the backside of a berm. That's the half berm approach. Now, as you continue to go east, that berm, and our engineer has actually increased the grading and the mound that comes back from the road. And in tying in from that road, from the existing edge of Marsh Lake Road, the existing edge is set at about a 1022. Our home sites are roughly around 1,000. So you're talking about 20 feet of elevation that fall from that road. So that entire slope that goes from the edge of Marsh Lake Road to the back of our lots as they're shown ranges from 10 to 22 feet in height and effectively functions as the backside of a berm, or the half berm approach that I'm talking about. Now, the other thing that I want to point out is we talked about screening a pretty significant tree line there, but I believe that the concerns with city staff were that eventually Marsh Lake Road maybe would have to be expanded. Although at this point, I'm not sure that it will be. Maybe Kara can speak to more of that if she's here this evening. I'm not sure. And so what we ended up doing is we originally had a 30-foot buffer of trees kind of situated at the bottom of the slope. You can see on the grading plan, I'm looking at it too here, all those green and blue lines, that's where the slope and the contours get kind of tight as you drop off that slope from Marsh Lake Road. What we ended up doing is we worked with city staff to basically put 2 rows of coniferous trees kind of right at the bottom of that slope. So you essentially have a slope down to a row of trees, and then that's where our home sites would begin. Now, what we're trying to do is meet the intent of the ordinance with a 40-foot separation. And actually, if you look at the site plan, we dimensioned off roughly 40 to 50 feet. That's from the back of the building pads of those home sites. So you have another separation from the back of the building pad to the edge of Marsh Lake, or to the edge of the right of way, to the edge of Marsh Lake Road. It's kind of hard to go through, but that's what we're trying to do to meet the intent of the ordinance. I hope that's clear, and I'm happy to answer questions about that. But we did take that into consideration because we know that is a very important project piece, and we wanted to make sure that we were implementing it to the fullest extent feasible without having to massively fill everything and really build a berm and bring the remainder of the site up, because the site slopes down so quickly from the existing road.
So it's still, so if I understand you correctly, that north edge of Marsh Lake Road, there's still going to be a significant drop, from that ditch.
That's correct. Yeah.
Down to those houses.
That's correct. The north edge of Marsh Lake Road. Let me see if I can find the exact contour. I'll point you right to it. So you see in lot 2 or lot 1, block 3, those 2 easterly sites, home sites.
Yep.
Okay. Do you see the green line that's just south of the red line?
Sure.
That's a 990 contour. The next green line, you can see two.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys, hang on a sec here. Can whoever's running the slide, can you zoom out so that we can see? I mean, I have it on my device, but just want to make sure that everybody can see exactly where he's referring to.
Those 2 green lines.
Zoom out.
Zoom out a little bit, so because he's referring to If you zoom out, so you can see the whole develop. That's better. Okay, I think that's clear. All right. Sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. My point is south of lot 2, block 3, you see 2 green lines among all the blue lines, right? The first blue line is a 990. I'm sorry. The second, bear with me. The first green line is a 990. The second green line is a 1,000-foot contour, and then you see the road. So my point is that from the road to those lots, you're falling at least 10 feet, probably closer to 12 to 15 feet, which serves as the backside of a berm. It's a landscape slope is what we're proposing because of the height that the road is relative to the proposed height of those home sites. As you continue further east, you can see that right around the edge of Marsh Lake Road, you're at 1,022 or 1,020. And then as you go down to lots 10 and 11, you're back to that, I believe it's 1,000 contour. So you're almost 20 feet of the backside of a slope or a slope coming down onto those lots right there. And we've taken that into account. So I can say that we have a half berm approach, the backside berm of approach the backside of a berm that we're proposing to landscape it and put trees in and still achieve the screening along Marsh Lake Road because those lots are so much further down than the existing road itself.
Yeah. Okay. I follow that. I'd like to hear what the other commissioners think. I'm not sure in my mind. I think that lives up to the intent. Any comments? Anyone else?
Well, this is Terry. I guess is the intent of the berm for the residents looking out or for people looking in?
I had the same question.
Like maybe it's a little bit, to me it was both. I do have a greater appreciation as to why this plan is what it is, but it still doesn't solve the looking in and hiding, rather than us looking like just a vast number of neighborhoods in a cornfield, which I think was the intent of the berming.
Yeah, and I agree. I appreciate all your comments earlier about on 11, how you're looking at the opposite sort of the inside of a berm, if you will. But I think in this case, traveling down a road that is so close to it, just as important is the outside, if you will, looking from Marsh Lake towards those houses.
Yeah, and I think you could make an argument that that's the more important part of why that's there is not people looking out their back windows and not being able to see farmland, but the other way around.
Correct.
But even with a 10 or a 12-foot drop, would you see those homes from there?
Well, you're going to build 30-foot. You're going to build 30-foot homes. We're going to see 20 feet of it.
But then we have a line of trees at the bottom as well. So it serves to be a landscape slope.
This is Laura Moore. One thing to note, these homes, they are fairly close to Marsh Lake. While there is a drop, but once that drop flattens, the slope flattens, the homes, they're not set back very far. Something to think about. One other thing I would like to say too, and I'm not sure how this impacts your overall development, but north of that red line, I guess that's just the property line, that seems to me, if that flattens at that point, that could be a good location, a natural location for a trail. If it truly flattens there, granted, I do understand that completely changes your development because you got to create an easement and your lots change. But I'm questioning if that's just a natural location for a trail there.
You're saying a trail right along Marsh Lake Road?
So no, I mean, it's on the north side of Marsh Lake. So where the red line is, that's actually not Marsh Lake there. That's your land there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're talking about the rear lot.
Correct. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. It's going to be hard to get it all. I mean, it's going to be hard to squeeze it all in this small little area. I acknowledge that, but
I think one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is whether a difficult site situation trumps kind of what we're trying to do with the guidelines. Here, it's a difficult site situation, but I would argue that that's not a reason to move away from the berm and sort of aesthetic that we've been trying to achieve as a city, or at least not automatically.
Can you elaborate a little bit as to why there's no overstory trees proposed?
We were proposing coniferous to be in that location so that they stay full all year round.
I have another question. This is not so much berm related, just to the grading along Marsh Lake Road. And I'm wondering, Paul, if you could, right now you're looking at map like 9, I see 9 of 42. Could you go to one down, map 10? Or I'm sorry, I've got a different screen open. I'm looking at that. Can you just go to, I don't know which one you're at, but can you go to 10 and zoom on it so we can see the entire slide?
Just one moment.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
It'll be a moment while you load the packet.
While we're waiting for it to load, I can answer the stockpiling question.
Okay.
So the stockpiling was done last year when we were grading our townhomes. We realized that we were going to need additional dirt in this area when future development came. So we ended up working with Minnehaha Creek Watershed and the city to obtain a grading permit that allowed us to put material down here because we knew that we would need the dirt in the future. So it has been done in accordance with proper grading permits and watershed procedures. Right now, that's what we're going to be using that dirt for, is to bring up those home sites and ultimately make the site work so that water flows and drainages can work as well. So it is accurate that we are going to change some of the grading, but it ties into the overall master plan for the community. And I guess that's what's difficult, is we're on our last piece of property here of a very, very long build out where rules and regulations have changed many times, and we're just trying to implement what the original master plan was for the area.
Understood. You know, while Paul's bringing that up, it kind of falls into my question as when he does get it up, the picture, the map, you see a side profile view of Bridle Way, and you can see the grading that's going to be done. And from my looking at this map, it looks like it's, you know, it explains why that stockpile is there, because it looks like it's in excess of 20 feet of fill that's being added along portions of Bridle Way. And I believe Kara's on the line. I know we've, as a city, have experienced some difficulties with settling, and I am not an expert, but when I see 20 feet of fill, that's a huge concern with settling. And I wonder if we've thoroughly vetted that, if it's been addressed.
I'm going to turn on my video so you can see me. Chair and members of the commission, I'm assuming you're looking for me to respond to that question.
I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. For those, I don't know if I've met all of you, but I'm Kara Guerin. I'm the city engineer, so have been involved in this process throughout the project. Yeah, I would note that the site is particularly challenging when it comes to grading. Paul was alluding to and referencing the amount of fall across this area that they're having to contend with. And whenever you're going in to develop a property and grade lots, you have certain minimums and maximums for grading that you have to meet in order to construct lots. So it isn't uncommon for grades to be changed. The city's role is to make sure that what the final grades are, that they meet the minimum and maximums allowed by the city's design standards and city code. In terms of the placement of fill, many different sites will have significant amounts of fill placed. The developer is required to employ the services of a geotechnical engineer to monitor and test and approve and sign off on all of the grading on the site. So that would occur here and has been similar to other developments throughout the city. So a pretty common process.
Okay. Thank you.
So we're still looking for that. Right now, it's a pretty large file, so it's freezing our system. Do you remember which page number or PDF page number that was?
In the PDF, it's 17 of 49.
17 of 49.
Yep.
We will go there.
Get it up. Okay. Commissioners, any other, as we wait and kind of go through, any other comments, concerns?
It's Mary Jo. I have a question.
Yeah.
Visually, I have trouble looking at a flat piece of paper and picturing hills, etc. Is there any place in Victoria or neighboring cities where the berm requirement has been altered to accommodate the topography? Any place we could look and see?
Well, one place that, right here on Marsh Lake Road, it was brought up earlier by Jen Mulhaville. On the west side of Marsh Lake Road, the berm is not to ordinance.
Okay.
Because it was part of the development at that point. Because Marsh Lake was thought that it's going to change and take it out, so it's not. So it's lesser. Other than that, I don't know offhand.
Chair, members of the commission, this is Marty. We actually did go out and snap a couple of photos of that earlier. So I don't know if Paul or Alyssa, are you able to pull up a photo of kind of that western portion of Marsh Lake Road where you can maybe get a visual of what something like this looks like?
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of the last photos in that PDF.
What?
If I'm not mistaken. It's page 44 of that PDF shows it.
Okay, we'll go to that. I mean, it's not the greatest.
Yeah, Paul, if you guys were able to pull those photos, I think they give a little better visual. This photo's a little squished
Okay.
together, kind of hard to see.
Yeah, it was a little wonky.
Was it on the shared drive, Marty?
Yes. And I don't know, Alyssa, if you can give me the ability to share my screen, I can pull it up on my screen too. Right now, I don't
Let's
have
do
the
that.
ability.
You know, and as you're doing that, I have another quick question. And looking at these maps, I was not able to determine. Looking at the sanitary sewer, is any of this currently lower than 25 feet?
Chair and members of the Planning Commission, the sanitary sewer all is less than 30 feet deep. There's one section right at the intersection of Catkin and Bridle that's about 29 feet deep. But it's within standards or within what we would allow as an exception to our standard. It's a real challenge because, again, because of the grading on the site. We looked at a whole lot of alternatives with their engineer to try to minimize that. That's part of the reason why the connection to Marsh Lake Road got eliminated. Eliminating that connection really helped improve the engineering design on the infrastructure.
Okay.
This is Marty again.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say I'm going to share this image now, so hopefully you can see it, which I think gives somewhat of a visual of what that looks like with the top of the berm at the road height and then the drop down with coniferous trees and screening.
It would be helpful to know what that drop is in comparison.
That's
I'm not sure.
Drop. That's a significant drop. That's at least 15 feet. It's probably 20 feet in area.
This is Mary Jo. I have a question.
Okay.
If you built up the street side of the berm, then you'd have to have a major retaining wall on the property side. Is that correct? In other words, to make it comply with the ordinance.
That's correct. If you were still to have lots on the Catkin side and you were to raise the grade in order to have that 8-foot height against Marsh Lake Road, you'd either have to do some pretty significant grading or potentially have, or likely have, some retaining walls on the backside.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Paul here with Lennar. We actually did entertain doing something like that, but it resulted in a fairly significant wall in the backyards of those home sites and kind of interfered with the storm drain that's in those rear yards as well. And we, after kind of kicking it around with staff, we opted not to go that route. That's another reason for this, actually.
Okay. Carol, since you're there, right of way was brought up. So is, with Marsh Lake Road and the city council, planning for the future 20 years down the road, potentially widening it, they wanted to acquire right of way. So do I understand that correct, that this does account for that?
Yeah,
the right of way is included?
Yes, as Mr. Tebow noted, they actually dedicated right away back in 2015, back when the road was planned to be a four-lane road. So
Okay.
they already did that. So that's built into the plan. And I would just note concerning the construction of the trail, staff did have a conversation relating to whether a trail should be constructed at this time. And the reason why staff did not recommend that be included is because of the fact that we don't have a final design or determination for at what elevation, or really to a certain extent, specifically horizontal location, Marsh Lake Road will be in the future. So if we were to require them to build that trail, which can be accommodated within the right-of-way that they provided, it is fairly certain that it would need to be removed and reconstructed at the time that the road was eventually, assuming it is ever reconstructed at some point in the future. If the city decided to never go the county road route, but still wanted to go in and construct a trail along that portion, the right-of-way would be available for that construction to occur.
Kara and Paul, was there any consideration given, if we were to compare this down, to the west far side of Marsh Lake Road, the developments in there have trail systems, more linking these neighborhoods, the different Laketown additions together. Was that considered?
So the trail system south of Wasserman and north of Marsh Lake Road, the trails that exist through there are part of the city's local trail connection plan. And that plan doesn't show a trail connection down to this location, but when Red Fox connects, that will have a trail located on it. This plan does have sidewalks which tie back into the sidewalk system that tie into the trail system on Red Fox.
Okay. All right. Any other comments from the commissioners?
Yeah, this is Shane Blazer. So even if you look, if you go to corner of Highway 5 and Bavaria, there is a development on the south of Highway 5, and it's down a pretty significant hill where there's not much of a berm. And you can still see many of the houses, even with trees, and the drop is much farther than what you're looking at there on Marsh Lake Road. Although they did try and hide it with a significant amount of, looks like, natural wildflowers and other landscaping right alongside Highway 5. My other comment is on the trail. I think leaving an easement or the option for development there in the future is probably the best bet until there's a plan for Marsh Lake Road.
Yeah. Yeah, I have just a general comment. I guess I'd like to kind of get some feedback from the commission. And I'm just, looking at this project, how it fits into a PUD with, kind of considering the berm. Right now I'm looking at on the agenda report, second page, bottom of page 2, beginning of page 3. I'll read from it. PUD is a tool that would allow city to consider changes to zoning standards in exchange for greater achievement of the stated Victoria development goals. Generally, the city has noted its desire to preserve, protect natural resources, establish park trail network, greenway system, establish significant berms and screening of new development with the county and state road systems. I just, personally, and I'm open to hear all your opinions. Personally, I don't feel that this project really lives up to that example or that you know, what we've set. Any comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is John Brownlee. I appreciate you saying that, and I completely agree with that assessment, and in particular in this location. I appreciate it's a difficult site, and that's an issue that the developer is going to have to deal with. But it's not clear to me that that's rationale to compromise some of the objectives that you just outlined. So I would agree completely with that.
Any other commissioners have any comments on that?
So I think I look at this and I just think, okay, what's another solution? What's a solution where we get our berm and it can be done from a environmental standpoint, just with the grade change there. So this is not the hard corner, and so I question if the depth of the berm could be less than 8 feet. I think if it was the hard corner, I think that we would need to definitely try to stay close to the 8 feet depth. But I'm just curious if that is a potential solution that visually could accomplish what we're looking for.
Laura, you said hard corner. What does that mean?
Yeah.
So the site is not at the hard corner. Let me pull up my aerial so I can just walk you through it.
By hard corner, do you mean like at the corner of 11 and Marsh Lake?
Yes, yeah.
Right. So it's up the way a little bit.
Exactly. It kind of wraps to the left a little bit. To the east. Excuse me, the west.
I understand your point there, but I think you could argue that this may even make it more important for the hard corner. If we were allow something like this, recommend something like this to happen here, you know, we set a precedent potentially for all of Marsh Lake Road.
I would agree with that. Is this slope from the north side of Marsh Lake Road down to the potential development area? Is that consistent along the length from here east to 11?
Sorry, John, I think you might need to say that again. Couldn't quite hear it.
So is the slope from the north side of Marsh Lake Road down, is that, I'm trying to visualize it. Is that consistent from this plot east all the way to Marsh Lake Road? In other words, additional developments along Marsh Lake Road to the east would have the same issue? I'm looking at my map, seeing if that's a question that makes sense, but do you follow what I'm asking there? It flattens out a little bit after there, doesn't it? Or no?
So if you're standing on 11 and walking west down Marsh Lake Road, at the corner of 11 and Marsh Lake Road, going up to the, if you're looking on screen now, you see that the subject site, and you see that right next to it is the Simon property, and then going east is Schmieg.
Right.
There is a drop off. It's not as significant as the Laketown 16, subject site. It sort of gets a little bit progressively steeper. It's still a progressive. I looked at it just today up along there. I got out and walked it all. It's 5 to 6 feet prior to that site, and then it does, get significantly more at that site. Right in the immediate shoulder, it's not a 15-foot drop or anything. It's about a 6-foot drop, but as you move north, it definitely drops down more.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be an issue for the whole thing, but it can be done. It's going to take a different project. It's going to take moving things around. But again, it kind of goes back to my earlier statement. It's going to take, we could talk about sites along 11 and 43, and I'm sure many of them had these same difficulties, but it was foresight that said, we're going to be committed to these berms for our community. And now here we are with them, and they're beautiful.
Right.
I'm worried what sort of precedent we set if we don't do the same thing here.
I am curious if there is an not environmental, but a tree company, right? A company that kind of specializes in all the different tree species and different options. If there's something that could be done that can grow stably with a root system with this kind of grade change, and how it could be done. I mean, if there's some solutions that we're just not thinking about right now.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, we would be okay looking into some type of slope planting to make the planting more substantial. Part of what we ran into was when we were getting, I'm trying to bring up my PDF again. When we were looking at how to plant the slope, we were told we could go roughly 15 feet beyond the rear lot lines. So basically planting a portion in those home sites and a portion outside of it, kind of landscaping the bottom of the slope. So we could look at, if there's more plantings that could be done along that, in terms of like shrubs or kind of medium-sized bushes or hedges or something. That is something that we could look at. And the other thing I want to bring up too is, so this is just preliminary at this point. The city is going to have another round of comments and reviews, because we still have to go through final plat, final construction drawing, final design. And so maybe we could continue to work with staff on how to screen the berm a little bit more or screen the slope a little bit more. If that would help the commission. I wanted to take a minute to address the comment that there was, there's really no PUD benefit or there's no cause for a PUD here. The whole, without getting too far back into the history of things, this whole community was meant to be built out as a PUD. And the PUD was done because of the difficulty, not only for this area, but for the entire community. And so we're on our last phase here, but throughout the history of the project, I feel, and I can just rattle a couple things off, we have gone above and beyond conventional practice. We satisfied all the park requirements for the entire master planned area with the dedication of the school site. And we constructed a trail in Outlot S to satisfy that park requirement a couple of years ago. I think that open space area was like 30 some odd acres or 28 acres. We've gone through numerous redesigns and reconfigurations involving ponding, wetland impacts, sewer depths, reroutes, and we've worked, I think, pretty well with city engineering staff, city planning staff. We've continued to exceed landscape requirements to soften the appearance of the community. We've exceeded, in the townhomes particularly, we exceeded parking requirements, we exceeded sidewalks, we exceeded a lot of the minimum requirements that when we were going through the Laketown 13 and 15. We've worked with property owners, working with the Cronins right now because they're surrounded on all three sides. And so we're working with them to establish their new driveway connection, and even deeded some more open space to the city last year because we ran into a situation where it didn't make sense to put home sites there. So we reconfigured it into an open space area with more trails, sidewalks on both sides of Bridle Way. I mean, I can go on, I'm going to stop, but throughout the years, as we've continued to work with staff, we've done a lot of things, and we have a long-standing tradition of building the homes that we build and delivering the communities that we do in the city of Victoria. So I just wanted to take a minute to explain that there's a lot that's going into this, and unfortunately we're left with the last piece. That's the most difficult piece, and conventional zoning doesn't quite work just because of the circumstances.
Mr. DeBone, this is Scott Stensland, and I hope, since I made that comment, I hope you did not consider my comment to mean in any way that Lennar has been anything less than a great partner throughout all of the development of Victoria, because that was not my intent whatsoever.
No,
but I absolutely agree with you that this is the last piece of it, and it is on Marsh Lake Road, and Marsh Lake Road is in 20 years what we need to look at is a major thoroughfare here, and I have a concern with that lack of a berm. I also have a concern just the sort of the drop off even into the houses from that road. I just wish there was, and it sounds like there may be another way to look at it. I mean, okay, so we can consider some bushes or something in the back. I would step that up. I would ask that get stepped up, and we consider a berm for ordinance.
Yeah, I would just add to that everything that you just went through, which is great, are table stakes and cost of doing business for doing major developments in a city like Victoria. It's not that, Scott, it's not that it's not appreciated. But I think Laketown 16 needs to be evaluated on its own. To your point, so I think I understood what you were saying, but I do think that we should evaluate this development on its own merits.
This is Mary Jo. I have a suggestion. It's so obvious, I kind of hesitate to say it, but we have a next door neighbor, the Arboretum, experts in knowing what plants to plant on slopes. And I'm thinking especially of prairie plants, but they could answer a lot of questions for us and perhaps give us some guidance as to how to handle a situation like this, especially since we'll probably have more of these in the future. That's all.
We actually have.
That's a great neighbor right down the way. Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we actually, on our design team, we have retained a licensed landscape architect. I'd be happy to, and it's the same one that's done the landscaping in every other phase. So I'd be happy to ask our landscape architects or also our installers to see what might be acceptable, if that's something that the city wants to see. Enhanced planting on the back side of the slope. That's what I'm hearing right now?
Well, that was a recommendation from Mary Jo. I think I'm going to kind of stick with what I had said before. I don't think planting is going to take care of this. I think my wish would be that we would consider a berm as ordinance requires. I think this is just as, I think in this situation, as we discussed earlier, front side, back side, it doesn't matter which side of the berm. I think they are equally important, maybe more so important from Marsh Lake Road side, looking at the homes. And in my opinion, planting is not going to replace that.
Yeah, Chair, I agree with that. I think the standards, they are. I apologize. I think the standards, such as they are a minimum requirement, and I agree. I think I would generally think that they need to be met from both sides of the equation, both from the development side and from the non-development side.
Mr. Kuhn, can you weigh in on this? Do you have any comments?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out from the Marsh Lake side, how high a berm. I mean, you could probably, you don't have to go the full height because you got the backside going down, but there's got to be a berm bigger than 8 feet on the Marsh Lake side. Just even for traffic wise, lights and whatever getting into the neighborhood. I don't think, I mean, the berm needs to be there in some sort of fashion. And I agree that we are setting this piece is setting up the rest of Marsh Lake Road. And if we don't do this piece right, you know, the rest of it's not going to get done. And unfortunately, you know, for Lennar, they're the ones that are starting it. And I just think that the berm is, you know, we just can't make a mistake on this deal.
Commissioner Blazer, do you have any comments?
I agree. I think the berm needs to be there.
Commissioner Moore?
I'm kind of torn, truly. I think the berm is important. I think that we need to look at other options. I think we need to consider, you know, all different types of vegetation that can create a berm. But I am concerned if we bring in fill or we change how this berm is constructed, it ultimately significantly impacts the viability of what they've proposed. So I get our ordinance, I certainly do, and we want it to be aesthetically consistent with our community, but these are all the things I'm thinking. So I think in my opinion, I think we first have to go through the process and figure out solutions to make a berm work there without significantly changing their site plan.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I would ask for Sarah Guerin to weigh in on, but my understanding is the only way to make a berm is to bring in significant fill, bring the site up to Marsh Lake Road grade as it is right now, and then build a berm on top of it. And what that's going to do is it's going to put the sanitary so deep that the site is not going to be serviceable. So Kara, can you vet that? Am I speaking about this correctly?
Chair and members of the commission, obviously I'm not the design engineer for the development, but that's fighting the depth of the sewer compared to the elevation of the lots and the road was certainly the competing constraints from an engineering perspective that their designer was trying to work through.
Okay. I was kind of going down the list here just to continue. Commissioner Schwarting, do you have any comments?
Well, again, I think the berm needs to be there. I hate to set a precedent that if it's difficult, you don't have to do it. I do understand the complexity of this particular site, but there just have to be some other creative ways, maybe as maybe the half berm on the street side and a retaining wall on the back side. I don't know, something that gets you back down to that lower grade, but I hate to give up on the berm.
Commissioner Gar, I know you had discussed, plantings and things. Do you have any other comments?
I think Laura made a point a few minutes ago about the depth from the street of the berm, didn't you, Laura? And perhaps adjusting that, get the full effect of a berm visually, but not taking so much of the land. Is that what you were proposing before, Laura?
Yes, but then at the same time, these evergreens are going to get 8 feet pretty easy. So yes.
That's true. I think I would hate to see us back off on the strength of our berm requirements, because I think the berms are what make this community, as it becomes developed, so beautiful. And I think it's our responsibility to keep that going, perpetuate that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Well, we're kind of getting to some. Sounds like we're getting some agreement on continuing with the berm, and I absolutely understand the difficulty in this, but I think it's important that, depending on how this moves forward, that it is, at a minimum, a consideration for moving forward, that we add that as a condition, that we would recommend a full berm. How do you feel about that?
If the motion is denial with a finding of fact, what does that mean for the developer's ability to make changes and come back and come before the commission again? Versus approval with conditions. How does that affect Lennar in terms of its ability to reconsider the development to meet the standard? Maybe that's a question.
Marty, would you like?
Yeah.
I think it's probably a question for Marty Dahl. Would you like to answer that?
Paul Moretto, can you speak to that, please?
Or Paul?
Yeah, I believe the process is that you would, if you decide to make a recommendation for denial and finding of fact, it would go to council. They would have to concur with your findings of fact. Basically, the plat as submitted or pre-plat submitted would be denied, and then they would have to resubmit under a different plan.
Okay, and how does that differ from approval with conditions? If we were to, I worry about the planning commission's ability to create a condition that has teeth. How does that differ from the approval with condition? Does it then move directly to the city council for approval based on some version of that condition? Can you walk through that again for those of us who haven't been doing this for all that long?
Right. So if you do decide to recommend a condition, the council would have to, accept that condition. If they approve with that condition included, there would have to be a resubmittal during final that would included those items. So like if for whatever size berm, if it's city standard berm, whatever it is, there would have to be a finding or showing that that was accomplished before moving forward.
And that would come back before the planning commission again?
The final, yes, it's under a PUD process. The PUD process is a bit unique.
Okay. Scott, do you want a motion yet?
Well, I want to make sure there's, I want to make sure there's no more discussion first. Let me run down once again, since we can't look each other in the face quite so easily.
Right.
Commissioner Kuhn, do you have any, I guess get a sense for what's happening now moving forward with a motion? Commissioner Kuhn, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I guess my only other question I have, from where the site sits today, are we raising grade on that site? Are we lowering grade on that site? If you were to drive by it today and see what it looks like, what's it going to look? Are we adding more grade to the area along Marsh Lake Road and raising that area already? Or is it staying where it's at? If somebody wanted to go and look at the site today and see what it looks like versus what it's going to look like 5 years from now.
I'm going to rely on Paul for that, but look, from what I could see on it, it is a combination of both. But I think there's grading and there's a tremendous amount of fill. I think overall it's probably being raised slightly. Paul, would you agree with that?
Are raising the site as it's proposed right now.
Okay. How far are we raising it? Are you raising it 5 feet, 10 feet? Do you really know?
Yeah, just looking at the rough contours existing at the low point is I'd say anywhere from roughly 10 feet in some areas. That's from one of the lower points by the wetlands too, on the north side.
I'm just talking like the area by Marsh Lake Road where we're looking at this berm. Like lots 1 through.
Yeah, the elevation of Marsh Lake Road is what's driving that height, because our engineer is having to tie in with the road as it is. So like in the case of, like for instance, on lot 3, block 3, I'm looking at the existing elevation is about a 984, 986. And when we grade it, it's going to be right around the same because it has to tie back into the contours that go up to the road. So in some areas, we're not raising it a whole lot. In some areas, we're filling it more.
Okay. I was just trying to picture it, from where it is today, what it's going to look like once the final grade is done before houses go in, and, if it's not coming up more or going down, what that slope's going to physically look like if you wanted to drive by and look at it.
Yeah.
Chair Stensland, it's Kara Guerin. If I were to jump in here, I think the thing that I would think about when I drove by it is right now there's a pretty continuous slope from the road down to the wetland, and that's going to have to get flatter in a lot of areas simply to accommodate home sites and, appropriate yards. There's still quite a bit of fall across the site, so the lots on the side by the wetland are still going to have some steeper backyard slopes going down to the pond. So you're trying to cut in flatter roads and flatter lots into a site that has a considerable amount of grade from one end to the other. So it's kind of hard to pick because it does vary across the site. It looks like Paul was saying, with fill in some areas and some cut in the other.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I understand. This is a challenge.
I think this might be a good instance where a 3D elevation could be incredibly helpful for us to visualize different solutions. you know, if we can get the heights right with the houses in the background, with the right distance driving down Marsh Lake Road, that might be very helpful for us.
This is Mary Jo. Laura, I totally agree with you. The computers must be able to come up with something like that, right? Or should we have a model, a 3D model?
These kind of renderings are done all the time, and they're done to scale with the correct depths and whatnot. So it can certainly be done for this property.
I think we need that before we can come to a final conclusion. I think we seem to have an opinion now that we need to examine this more, so we would have the condition of further examination. And with the 3D models, that would be excellent.
Scott, this is Christian. Can I talk?
Sure.
Well, I don't know, because I'm not sure what I am on the whole list. If you can go to Google Earth, you basically get the positioning. And I think what people want to see is what is on the south side as far as berming is concerned. But when you go to the north side of Marsh Lake Road, you get the drop off. And that's where our concern is. And so, I don't know, to me, it looks like it's something that would lead itself to a small berm, maybe a wall, small berm, bushes or trees like they're talking about. But to answer Mary Jo and Laura's comments, if you can get to Google Earth and not Google Maps, you can get a view of the actual area and you can see exactly what it looks like today. And I think what we want to see is more along what's on the south side with the berming. And then once you get to the other side, you get the problems with the drop off. And that's kind of the issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
The rendering.
You don't have to be on Google Earth. You can see on Google Maps. That's a really good suggestion.
The rendering can be drawn with all those assumptions, with how it's drawn or how it's designed today, with, you know, an evergreen that's 10 feet tall based on the drop and grade based at 15, 16 feet. These are things that architects can create.
This is Christian. Yeah, I was just saying there's a way you could kind of see what it looks like now today. And that sounded like that was something that you guys were looking for. That's all. Nothing more.
Thanks. I think if we were to consider that, it would have to be something that comes from, I mean, of course, you can go to Google and look at it, but I think for accuracy, if it was something that we were to consider, it would have to be something that was submitted to us through Lennar, through their architects. And obviously, we don't expect that right now because we didn't ask for it. But that gets us to, so where do we go from here? And that's the $1 million question. I was kind of working down the list. We've heard from the last commissioner, Commissioner Swarting. Do you have any additional comments?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
Can I just throw something out there? This is Shane.
Yes, please.
On the homes that I mentioned earlier along 5 in Bavaria, the majority of what you see is through trees and landscaping where you can see the homes. But if you look at the corner of Bavaria and 5, there's a pretty significant berm. And then as you leave Victoria heading east on the 5 and approach that same development, there's a very small berm. So if you're driving by at full speed, you may not even see it as you're looking at it. So it's more like there's a berm on either end of the development, and then in between there isn't, and it's just landscaping. So I don't know if that's a possibility at all.
Okay. So do we have a forming of any motion at all right now?
Well, Scott, this is John Brownlee. I think it sounds like there's fairly broad consensus for a motion that's either, because I don't hear any other discussion around the project that would lend itself to denying the project other than the berm, the aesthetics from Marsh Lake Road. And it's clear that there, to me anyway, as I listen to the group, that there is not consensus that that they have satisfied either the technical standard or sort of made everybody feel comfortable about that. So I think the motion either needs to be an approval with the condition that they meet the technical standard of the berm as it's stated, or a denial with the finding of fact and let them come back to the planning commission with a new proposal that does meet that standard. For myself personally, I appreciate the developer's situation with a difficult piece of property, but that to me is not a reason. And I thought Mary Jo said it really well. We take seriously our role in making Victoria stay what it is. I don't think a difficult piece of development property is a reason to minimize that standard. So from my perspective, I would go with one of those two motions, either to approve with a strict condition to comply with the standard or deny it with the same messaging and have them come back and once they've figured out how to do it. And I don't think trees does the job.
I agree with you.
So I would be prepared to put a motion in, but I think maybe what we should do as a group is agree on whether that motion is an approval with an explicit condition to comply with the standard, or whether it's just a denial and say, with implicitly saying come back once you figured out how to do it.
Right.
And I don't want to put any undue burden on the developer, who's, I agree, has been a great partner. But I think in spite of the fact that the Laketown 16 needs to stand on its own, and it's clear that it hasn't met that standard yet.
I agree with that. Commissioner Kuhn, can I have your thoughts on that?
I agree. I don't know if I agree with Commissioner Brownlee, but I really don't think I think I would rather do an approval with conditions versus a denial. Just I believe the lots work. It's just up to that berm and getting that berm to work and pass the ordinance. So however we need to do that.
Okay. Commissioner Gar, your comments?
I agree. Approval with condition that the berm requirement be met.
Commissioner Blazer, comments?
I agree with that.
Commissioner Moore?
I'm at the mindset approval with conditions. However, I really want to drive in on the conditions and specific about what those conditions are, if they're outside of what our standard berm requirements are.
Okay. I think we can get a motion, and then we can still have further discussion to drill down on conditions, if that's kind of what it sounds like it's going right now. Commissioner Swarty?
My first thought was to go with the approval with the condition, but if to Laura's point, if we're going to revise, they're not going to be able to meet the letter of the intent of the berm and want something different, then it almost seems like, do we need to review that option? So, but my initial thought was to approve with the berm condition.
Okay. And I agree with that. I think that's reasonable. I think, and also, considering all the work that we've done with Lennar and, again, trying to be in the spirit of being good partners, I think that is a reasonable route. I think we all share the same condition or concern, excuse me, with the berm, and I think this would be a good option. So I will, open this up right now. Do I have a motion?
Scott, this is John Brownlee. I would move that we approve with the condition of the developer meeting the explicit standards for the berms that are set out for any other development. So I would move that the approval, the condition to the approval be the explicit satisfaction of the berm standard.
Okay. Is there a second?
Mary Jo would like to second that.
Okay. I have a motion by Commissioner Brownlee. It's been seconded by Commissioner Gar, I'm sorry. So any further discussion specifically around the conditions?
Chair Stensland.
Yes.
This is Marty. If we are going towards motion to approve with conditions, please also note that staff is recommending that final approval of rezoning from R2 to PUD be included as a condition as well to approval, since we will be doing that rezoning with the final plat.
Yeah, and Marty, we would also, one of the conditions would be basically in the letter that you addressed to Lennar, April 13, 2020, basically, I would say multiple conditions in there, kind of next steps, conditions, that would also be a part of this. Would that be acceptable?
Yes, some of those engineering conditions may end up changing depending on what would need to be done to meet the berm condition. But yes, that would be, as it stands currently, that would be accurate.
Okay, so that'll be part of it.
Scott, is it, Commissioner Stensland, is it possible then to have the motion state that moving at the approval with the conditions of the development explicitly meeting the berm standards plus the recommended conditions provided by staff?
Okay.
Is that an acceptable way to state that without naming them all specifically?
Well, I think the explicitly with the berm, and then also include conditions and recommendations from the staff outlined in the letter addressed to Lennar Corporation, April 13, 2020.
Yes. So yes, I think that's the appropriate way to state the motion.
Okay.
And it probably needs to be seconded again, considering it's been amended.
Yeah, we'll change it. Marty, would that be acceptable to you?
Yes, that is acceptable. And just to clarify again, you're including the approval of final rezoning from R2 to PUD as well.
Yes.
Zoning R2 PUD. Okay. Commissioner Brownlee, do you want to restate that motion, please?
Okay, so the motion.
I'm going to take some notes here as we go.
Well, I'm going to summarize it. So what I move that we approve with the conditions of the developer explicitly meeting the berm standards, as well as all of the motions, or I mean, all of the conditions submitted by staff in the published documents that you listed prior.
Submitted by staff in the letter.
Yeah.
Addressed to Lennar, April 13, 2020. And to include the rezoning of the plat from R2 to PUD.
Is that included in that letter?
Oh.
No, that would, that would, yeah, so that would need to be explicitly stated. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it is. Okay.
So the motion is approval with the condition of meeting the standard for the berm, as well as the PUD change and the staff recommendations in the letter dated the date that you just mentioned.
April 13.
April 13, thank you.
22.
Does that cover it all?
Paul, do you have that?
We've got it.
Okay. Do you want to?
Yes.
Would you mind? Would you mind, please, just repeating that for us?
Yeah. So oh, go ahead, Paul.
No, go ahead, Marty. We have to do this tertiarily.
I was going to say the motion is to approve the preliminary plat with the condition that the developer meet the explicit standards of the city's zone berm ordinance, including the conditions that were listed in the staff letter to Lennar on April 13th, 2020, and final approval of rezoning from R2 to PUD.
Okay. So I have a motion submitted by Commissioner Brownlee. It's been seconded by Commissioner Guerra.
No, I don't think that's been seconded in kind yet, Scott. I think we need a second.
So I have a motion. Is there a second?
I will second this second motion also. This is Gar.
Okay. Thank you. I have a motion by Commissioner Brownlee, seconded by Commissioner Gar. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Brownlee.
Aye.
Commissioner Kuhn.
Aye.
Commissioner Gar.
Aye.
Commissioner Blazer.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Swarting.
Aye.
This is Chair Stensland. Aye. The motion will pass. Thank you. Appreciate everyone's discussion, thoughtful discussion on this matter. Now we're going to move on to miscellaneous section of our agenda. Staff, do we have any miscellaneous items?
Nothing to report from Paul.
Nothing from Marty either. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any miscellaneous items tonight? Going once? Going twice? Okay, doesn't sound like there's any. Thank you. Any final items at all? Well, I'd just like to thank you all for your participation. Again, this is it's getting better, I think, and I know it's a little extra work, but thank you to the commissioners, thank you to staff, thank you to Paul. I appreciate everyone being on. I Thank you for our callers. We appreciate this is not easy, and we really appreciate your contribution tonight. If there are no more items before us tonight, and no questions, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Can I have a motion, please?
Commissioner Kuhn makes a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Blazer, second.
I heard Commissioner Blaze first. Blaze got in by the bell. So I have a motion made by Commissioner Kuhn. It's been seconded by Commissioner Blaze. I'm going to do a final roll call of the evening. Commissioner Brownlee?
Aye.
Commissioner Kuhn?
Aye.
Commissioner Garb?
Aye.
Commissioner Blazer?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore? Commissioner Moore?
My apologies. Aye.
Commissioner Swarting?
Aye.
Commissioner Stensland? Aye. Motion carries. The meeting is officially closed. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a great evening. Stay safe.